there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Friday. Is it just me, or has this week taken forever to get to today? And I attribute it to nothing really going on in the news. I mean, there hasn't been really a lot of Wyoming-centric news stories to talk about, unless, of course, you're referring to Tom Lubnow, which, I wouldn't even put him anywhere near the top of the list. He's got another stupid op-ed up.
Please never refer to Tom Lubnow again. Did you say Friday?
I did say Friday. Open Line Friday. That's right, my friends. Today is Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics. This is the day where we want to talk about whatever you want to talk about. Normally during the week, you kind of have to talk about what's on my mind, or, I just probably won't answer the phone, but not today. Today, I put this program at grave risk and just open up the phone lines, and we will talk about whatever is on your mind. So go ahead and give me a call. It's 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989 is the number here in the Cowboy State Politics Studio. Whatever you've got on your mind, give me a call, and we'll talk about it. I don't know if you realize this or not, Agent 29, but for the first time in a long time, I had a discussion about the Frontier Republicans. I thought that they had been,
Are they still a thing?
They actually are. They still have a website. Periodically I check it just to see if they're still around. But yeah, they still have a website, and there are still members of the Frontier Republicans running around. One of whom happens
running.
Well, yeah.
I've never seen a Frontier Republican run.
Well, they run away from truth and transparency and anything that's conservative. I mean, but one of them is on the Ranchester Town Council, Jessica Weaver. I didn't know that until we got to talking about it the other night with some friends. And so Frontier Republicans still around, and Tom Lubnow is one of the guys that helped start. Now, I'm not going to go through his dumb op-ed because it's really not worth it. Just to point out one thing. And it begins this way. At the beginning of the year, I wrote a column about how the Wyoming Freedom Caucus would create straw villains as an election issue. Villains would be created where no actual villains exist as a campaign tool to call people names. In a June column, I outlined how the plan is working. And then anytime a thoughtful legislator asks a question or proposes an amendment to fix stupid language of a bill, the Freedom Caucus sends out outrageous mailers claiming that the thoughtful legislators support pedophiles and pornographers. Now, what you're seeing here is not an attempt to analyze any sort of situation. It's Lubnow using his column to just hurl insults, villains, accusing people of saying, hey, you're using the word pedophile and pornographer, stupid bills, stupid language, and he goes on to swear in the piece. In argumentation, anytime you get your opponent to start swearing at you, you win. Anytime they start hurling insults, you know that you've won the argument. And so what Tom Lubnow is doing is taking a page out of the National Democrats book and thinking that he'll look cooler if he swears a little bit. Tom, you've never been cool. Never, ever. And so you shouldn't even try. There's no reason to. And, your arguments don't make any sense anyway. So, I don't even know why you try. Well, on the program today, we've got a number of different things we're going to talk about. What's really going on in Texas, and that the Democrats in Wyoming, they're setting up town halls across the state to let people know that they're still there. It's like making the phone call and say, "Hey, did you forget about me? I haven't heard you say anything about me in a long time."
Was it Mark Twain that said the rumors of my demise are greatly exaggerated,
Yes.
or something to that
Yeah,
effect?
it was. But the Wyoming Democrats, they've decided that they're going to hold town halls across the state, and they're going to embark on a listening tour. We always hear these politicians saying, "Well, I'm going on a listening tour to find out what our constituents want." And that way I can be fully engaged into what issues are important to them. Well, the Cowboy has this piece entitled "Wyoming Democratic Lawmakers to Hold Town Halls Outside of Their Own Districts." Mike Yin and Carly Provenza, blue hair herself, are holding town hall meetings outside of their districts this month, and they're going to travel to Cheyenne, Casper, Lander, and Park County to let people know that Democrats are not disappearing.
There's a third Democrat in that picture,
JT, oh, that's right.
just over Mike's left shoulder. And if you don't believe he's a Democrat, if you've thought that he was a Republican, just check out the directory published by the Water Board.
Yeah, and I've got this somewhere.
Yeah.
I think you sent it to me yesterday.
Well,
I'll get it lined up and we can show it to you.
Yeah, there are three of them that we'll leave the other two as a surprise. But
yeah, but
it's really not a surprise.
No, it's not a surprise to anybody that follows Wyoming politics that we really do have Democrats inside the Republican Party. And all you got to do is look at their voting record to figure that out. It's no giant surprise. But the actual Democrats, the ones who I actually like, they say, or at least the Cowboy says about them, the Democrats currently hold a combined 8 seats in the state legislature, with 2 in the Senate and 6 in the House. The party holds no representation at the federal level, as Wyoming's entire congressional delegation belongs to the Republican Party. The party is also facing funding struggles, as its state central committee currently operates at a loss. Party officials estimated in June that they would be left with only 2 weeks' worth of funding by the end of 2025. Democratic leaders are now pushing back through a series of listening events scheduled in red districts across Wyoming. Maybe if they held more town halls and less funding of protests, maybe they would have more cash to operate. But instead of actually listening, the Wyoming Democrats are interested only in setting up protests across the state. And a lot of them, if you go down and talk to these folks, most of them have no idea why they're there, nor do they really have an in-depth knowledge of any of the issues that they're protesting against. The last one I went down to and actually talked to somebody, it was fight the oligarchy, or one of those. And I engaged one of the protesters and said, "What exactly is an oligarchy?" "Well, it's what we have now." Well, no. Well, if you're referring to the Biden administration, maybe, but can you define the word oligarchy for me? And nobody could define anything. And I actually asked the question, "Hey, so if you're fighting against having a king, don't you think that the fact that you can have a protest against kings means that you don't have one?" Again, no answer. They have no idea why they're down there.
Yeah, who printed and gave you your sign?
They actually,
you don't know what it means.
If you pay attention to the Sheridan Compress, they excuse me, they hold sign making sessions at the Hub on Smith. So at a publicly, semi-publicly owned building, or at least operated on public funds, the Democrats make their signs there. But maybe if they did less of that and more town halls and talking with constituents, maybe they would find more traction. Quote, "We're really hoping that people will understand that the Democratic Party is here for the state of Wyoming and basically send a message that we're not disappearing. We're not gone. We're still here, and we're still fighting the good fight to represent Wyoming working families and values," Wyoming Democrat Party Chairman Lucas Freilich told the Cowboy State Daily. Wyoming Republican Party Chairman Brian, we're not going to read that one. All right, I will. Brian Miller said in an email that these town halls are an attempt by Democrat leaders in Wyoming to try to get back in touch with the grassroots. That's a revelation of the blatantly obvious. Of course, that's what they're doing. Like, the Democrats really haven't ran any serious candidates in, God, I don't know how many years.
Well, it seems telling to me, get back in touch. Okay, what happened? And the same thing with the frontier Republicans. They need to get back in touch. These people don't realize, people like Tom Lubnow have no idea how they sound.
No.
There's no self-awareness where they come from. They will say that about us, but I'm out amongst the public continually. I'm going to be out there again today. Great.
Well, no, I mean, you made it sound like you don't like hanging out with the public.
Well, I don't mind hanging out with the public. It's just some of the other company that's going to be there that would just as soon pass.
Well,
on.
and that's another problem. Like, a lot of these big events, they're really not town halls. I mean, Chuck Gray is holding one later today in Dayton. That's a town hall where he's actually going to, speak for a little bit and then take a bunch of questions.
This event today is a photo op.
Yeah, it's a ribbon cutting up at the hospital, and Gordon is going to be there. And really, it's just an opportunity for politicians to give speeches. I mean, that's what the deal at Ramaco was. But there again, that was a ribbon cutting for a private company. If Democrats really wanted to get in touch with their constituents, maybe they should go talk to them, which I guess is what they're doing, except they're doing it outside of their district. So, I don't know. I mean, there are billboards in Sheridan that say Democrat or Sheridan County Democrat Party here for good. Well, I don't know that that's entirely true, because most of what you see them doing is protesting. They don't really get engaged in any county politics that I've seen, unless, of course, you count Nick Siddle, Lonnie Wright, and Christy Antoinette Haswell.
I always look at things a little bit differently. When it says here for good, I think actually they should have said here for ill.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it's a play on words. They don't have great genes, but they evidently they're here for good. Well, anyway, I wish Representatives Mike Yin and Carly Provenza good luck. I mean, if you'll notice, they're going to the places where they think they have a pretty good Democrat constituency, which the truth is, I think, and maybe Ken, you and I can talk about this, but in my opinion, Wyoming is really not overwhelmingly conservative. I mean, I would say at best it's a 60-40 split. That 60% of the people that live here, if they knew the issues, if they knew the candidates, would vote, conservatively, and the other 40% are pretty hardcore Democrat. And if you take counties like Johnson County, for example, I mean, I don't know that Johnson County has ever elected a Democrat. They probably have, way back. But try to be a conservative and run for office in that county. You'll get trampled. In the last election. And, I mean, there was some other extenuating circumstances. Liberty Poley got in the mix and screwed everything up for the conservative. That was done on purpose, which kind of means that the people that did that are sort of Democrats. But anyway, that's another subject. But I really think that the makeup of the state ends up being, about 60% conservative, 40% Democrat. And so if the Wyoming Democrat Party had actually fielded some good candidates, and, and here's an interesting thing, Agent 29. When I started Cowboy state politics, there were some pretty well-spoken Democrats in the House of Representatives. There was Chad Banks. Of course, Carly Provenza was there, Trey Sherwood, Kathy Connolly was there, and then all the rhinos, of course, which are just Democrats. But the Democrat Party itself had, a much larger representation in the House of Representatives. And I think it's just a matter of them not fielding good candidates.
It is a shame that we have so many rhinos, that say we can't get elected in Wyoming. It wasn't that many years back when we often had a split house. We'd have the House would be Republican, the governor would be a Democrat. We've had several Democrat governors.
And the history of Wyoming is not a Republican one.
Yeah, that's true. It's I firmly believe I'm the first conservative to ever hold the seat that I hold here in Sheridan. But your idea of a 60-40, it might be split that far. I would say it's a little bit closer to like 56,
55, 45,
something like that. But currently, the people who are most apt to vote, to get out and to be active, tend to be conservatives.
Yeah, no, that you're absolutely right. The folks that are the most conservative end up being the folks that are out there in front of the people. And it's an interesting thing because if you look at the amount of people that voted for President Trump in the last election, I mean, it was overwhelmingly, a pro-Trump vote, and it's hard to make the argument that it wasn't all conservatives that made that vote. But it's still, in some ways, I think I would make the argument that a Wyoming Democrat is a little bit different than the radical Democrats in Washington, D.C. or in other states.
If you look at most contests or polls, about 56% is a pretty good chunk, And so then just to throw us down a little rabbit hole here for a second, when you look at a poll that says 75% of the Wyoming public don't want us to become a nuclear waste dump, that's substantial. That's what we call.
But I think that's probably a bunch of Democrats too.
Yeah, it's exactly what I'm getting at. That's truly bipartisan now. Because you've crossed that threshold, there aren't enough Republicans to get you there. So
right, and Wyoming is very. I mean, it's interesting politically, and there's a lot of different factors going on. But if the Democrats wanted to actually make any headway in the state legislature, then they should run. They should run some good candidates, and they really haven't. And no serious candidates. I mean, you can't make an argument that Martha Wright was going to beat you. I mean, she didn't really campaign. She didn't really hold any town halls. I don't know how much door to door she did with her constituents. I don't know any of that, but I didn't see her out there. I didn't see her, really being active at all. So anyway, I wish the Democrats luck. And actually, here's the other thing too. If we had a stronger Democrat Party, it would be better for Wyoming's political system because at the very least you could have a more honest discussion. You get the Democrats versus the Republican. We could actually have a debate instead of conservatives versus a bunch of rhinos and have them muddying the water as to what conservative values actually are. And I have had several conversations with Mike Yen and said, man, we need to talk about how to get your party on a little bit better footing. And I don't mean that. And it sounds contradictory, right? Because it sounds like, hey, Dave's in favor of the Democrats. No, I'm in favor of the rhinos going back to their own party, the redcoats.
Yeah, we talked a little while ago about the idea of the new Republicans, the new conservatives.
Yeah, the new right.
I've said many times my dad was a John Bircher. I was raised pretty hard right. Didn't know it at the time. I thought everybody was that way. But I really resent this whole attitude that the establishment is putting out about these people that are coming in to office now. They're a bunch of MAGA idiots that are just now becoming aware or whatever. No. We've been this way for a long time. And what we're frustrated by is the fact that you guys come home and try to pretend to be one of us.
Yeah.
And then go back there and the gig is up. We're tired of that.
Well, and I've said for a really long time that the biggest insult to Wyoming voters is you have somebody show up on your doorstep and they say the right things. They say, I'm a conservative. I love my guns. Abortion is bad. Let's not kill any babies. Taxes are too high. Gosh, aren't property taxes through the roof? And the government spends too much. You should vote for me. And people in Wyoming generally are a pretty trusting bunch. And so what we do is we say, well, this guy's a conservative, and we go fill in that little circle for them. And then they go down to Cheyenne and they do exactly the opposite. And the perfect example of that is Poison Barry Crago. Every single one of his campaign mailers has the word conservative displayed prominently on the flyer. Well, when you look at Barry Crago's voting record, he's anything but a conservative. I mean, it's in many cases. I mean, Wyo Rhino had him scored at a 20%. I think he did a little bit better on Wyo vote. I think he's more, towards the top end of the liberals. But I mean, he's still not a conservative. And yet here's the worst part of it, Ken. He comes back from Cheyenne and he gets, he writes articles in the newspaper and does interviews, and he tells all of us that he's conservative and says, well, we worked hard at that. We just couldn't get it done. We'll have to try again next time. Sorry about your property taxes, but we're working hard on them. I'm really sad that we didn't get that done. I mean, and bull crap like that. I've watched him do it.
Well, that's why I gave up my retirement. At least the first few years of it. I watched John Patton. I was very frustrated by him. He came to an untimely death, and they appointed Mark Kinner. And I thought, well, let's give this guy a chance. Mark Kinner is the quintessential
redcoat.
I saw him. In fact, I was running sound, and I wanted to yank my microphone out of his hands. But I saw him come up and do this, like, whoop, whoop, Republican, ain't it great to be a Republican? We deserve, smaller government and less. My eye, it was shocking, and it was really discouraging.
Well, and as it turns out, later on in the program, one of the big stories I want to talk about, and, after the break, we're going to end up talking about, redistricting a lot. I mean, that's a big issue. We're going to talk about what's going on in Texas. And really, there are a ton of similarities with what's going on in Texas and what was happening at the Wyoming legislature and what we are experiencing in the Wyoming Senate. And I've got a piece of sound for you from Texas that you're going to listen to it and say, holy crap, that is exactly what's happening in Wyoming, or what did happen in Wyoming. So we'll do that after the break.
Everybody say, nice got away, rocks not dead, nothing left to say. No one gets today, you got to see the truth, not far away. Tell me what you want, here's what you got. It's every day more than we have ever seen. Love is mountain, so that's why.
It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listen to the president just a little bit too closely, and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only going to get stronger. Every single day this program is expanding, and I got to tell you, my friends, it is all because of you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being a viewer. and a listener of Cowboy State Politics. You can listen to the podcast every Monday. Well, you can listen to the podcast anytime you want, but it's new episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. There's a new episode of Weekend Update coming out tomorrow, so don't miss that. And of course, the live program, which you're listening to right now, is every Tuesday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m., most Tuesday through Fridays from 8 to 10 a.m. And today, of course, is Open Line Friday. Go ahead and give me a call. The phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989. If you want to weigh in on what I'm talking about, or if you have something else on your mind that has really been stuck in your craw, well, go ahead and give me a call. That phone number again is 307-374-8989. Now, we've been talking a lot about Zoran Mamdani in New York, and he's got another guy, not his, but there's another guy in Minneapolis, a Somali immigrant, who is pretty much, ideologically a carbon copy of Mamdani. And there's another one in Seattle. From the Daily Wire. Iconic U.S. city inches closer to electing female version of Zoran Mamdani as mayor. Quote, left-wing activist Katie Wilson came out ahead of incumbent Democrat Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell in Tuesday's mayoral primary election, placing her in a strong position to defeat the incumbent in November's general election. Washington has kind of a weird primary system. It's unlike most other states in which the top two winners out of the primary advance to the general election. So even though this Katie Wilson person won the primary and the incumbent came in second, they both still go to the general elections. Very different than it is in Wyoming, where if you win the primary, you're the candidate that goes to the general election. So another state that, it's a Democrat attempt to water down the results of an election. But Wilson, whom multiple leftist outlets have favorably compared to socialist Democratic New York City mayoral candidate Zoran Mamdani, received 46.21% of the vote, while the incumbent mayor received 44.86%. Wilson was prominently endorsed by the King County Democrat Party and the Democrat committees of multiple Washington legislative districts. Now, under Seattle's, I just explained that. So Wilson is the co-founder and executive director of the Transit Riders Union, a Seattle-based Democratic membership organization, according to her campaign's website. The TRU's website describes the organization as an independent Democratic member-run union of transit riders organizing for better public transit in Seattle, King County, and beyond. So it's a union of people that patronize the public transportation system. It's not a union of employees. So really, she's organized a group of people that are opposed to the way that the transit authority and the trains and cabs and all that have been operated, and so she organized against it. A June 29th op-ed in the Urbanist, a published that later endorsed Wilson, called the transit union leader, quote, a progressive who would bring a long run of timid centrist leadership similarity to an end, adding that the similarities are numerous between her and Mamdani. The op-ed stated that both Wilson and the New York Socialist are, quote, young, stridently progressive, and reviled by political elites in their city. Wilson used to be a policy and politics writer for The Urbanist, among other outlets. Though seen as a moderate by many, Harrell has faced significant criticism from the right, notably for labeling a pro-life event and Christian concert, quote, an extreme right-wing rally. If she were to win the general election, the Democratic incumbent would be the first two-term Seattle mayor. If the incumbent were to win, she would have been the first two-term Seattle mayor since 2009. And so, to argue that Mamdani or the idiot in Minneapolis are just isolated, incidents, I don't think that that's true. The Democrat Party has moved farther and farther to the left, and its more radical contingent have been, they're the folks that are really good at organizing. And they've realized that to have any effect, well, they're going to have to get elected, which is why you end up with folks like AOC and Rashida Tlaib and all those folks, the squad.
There was a comment in there, timid centrist.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's true.
We don't build monuments to timid centrists, and yet that's what the press says this is what we need for leadership. We need somebody
It's in the middle.
that listens to both sides and then thoughtfully considers everything. No, we need somebody that has a vision,
Yes.
somebody that is going to blaze a trail, and then you can follow somebody. You can't follow somebody who's trying to follow you.
Well, I mean, we have so many examples of that in the Wyoming legislature, of which we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. But folks that they hold up their finger, they do this, find out which way the wind is blowing, and that's how they vote. But there's a really great Rush Limbaugh speech that he gave at I think it was at a banking convention. And he said that, I've had a lot of people tell me that I need to moderate my program, move it more to the middle, get more listeners. And, there's been, and I'm paraphrasing here, there's some wisdom in that. You move to the middle, get more people, more advertising, more money for me. Maybe it might work. And so he said that he sent out his staff all across the country to find all of the biographies of all the great moderates in American history. They're so great. Everybody says you need to be in the middle. I get the same crap. David's too extreme. I don't like your tactics. Maybe you need to moderate your program, include some other people. And you know what he says he found? Nothing. There is not one single biography of any great moderate in American history, because there are no great moderates in American history. The folks that end up being successful in politics are, either they're really good at deceiving their constituents, or they're just so spineless that they don't make a mark on anything. Their only motivation is to get reelected. We need to dig up that soundbite and play, because it's absolutely hilarious. I might have it, and I'll look for it during the next break. But anyway, there are no great moderates in American history. And it wasn't that long ago on the program I was telling you that, sometimes, a lot of the time, the people that you end up thinking are villains tend up to be, sometimes they end up being not so villainous every once in a while. And the folks that you think are good, well, sometimes they have some characteristics that are not so great. And so what you'll find in American history is the folks that you think are heroes. Andrew Jackson's a good example. He a Democrat. He had some really bad stuff going on, but he also did some really good things. There's a carving on the side of a mountain in South Dakota of Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt was the first progressive, and yet he's sitting up there on Mount Rushmore with George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. And the point being is that there are, like in politics, if you're a moderate, yeah, you might get reelected, but you're not going to make your mark on anything. And it is the Democrat socialists in America that are doing a really good job at organizing. And here's the result of that. Immigrants come to this country for a better life. At least, and I would say even the illegal aliens do. And it's just, one group is doing it legally, the other one is doing it illegally. But thousands flee to America, and what they find here is, it's like one of my good friends. Her name is Malene Salabaria. She emigrated here from Cuba. And if you hang around the Wyoming Capitol, you've probably met her. But she said when she left Cuba and got to Democrat-run Florida, what she found was the same thing that she left in Cuba, except more money and better Wi-Fi, is the way that she puts it. But a lot of the Democrat policies that are happening in states, they are very similar to other countries. And this is a good example. In this piece, they're talking about support for North Korea, and that's Zoran Mamdani. Let me just read you the couple of the opening paragraphs here. Kim Jong-un probably wouldn't poll well among Americans, except your typical liberal arts undergrad bumming around a Brooklyn coffee shop. New York City's Democrat Socialists of America faction endorsed the People's Summit for Korea, which bizarrely calls for the reunification of the country with the despot Kim Jong-un in charge. The summit was held in a Harlem church on July 25th through July 27th. Democratic mayoral candidate and nominee Zoran Mamdani is the most prominent member of the NYC DSA, or the New York City Democrat Socialists of America. The mayoral candidate has yet to issue a statement on his organization's support for the People's Summit event of early afternoon on Wednesday. Quote, what does it tell New York's Chinese or Korean immigrants who fled to the city to get away from oppressive regimes, political strategist Hank Scheinkopf told the New York Post. What does it say to others who fled here because of repressive regimes? It tells them that if you support Mamdani, the people who are with him are going to do terrible things to us. And it's not just his economic policies, which are horrendous, by the way. He is an avowed, he calls himself a Democrat socialist, but really he's a communist. The economic policies are going to be disasters for New York City, and he is an Islamist. He is a Marxist. And I mean, there's no getting around it. I mean, he's very much anti-Israel. I mean, he's the worst nightmare. And by the way, did you know, Ken? Do you know where the largest constituency of Jewish people is? It's not Israel. It's New York City. So I mean, there's a lot of things going on in New York, and you should pay attention to these candidates because there's more than what you think.
We had a video yesterday in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And we noticed all the people walking around the hijabs. But you also notice...
Hijab.
Whatever. Tomato. You also noticed political signs. You noticed that there was a door that only... This is the door that women are supposed to use.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things. We said earlier in this show... that conservatives tend to be the most politically active. Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you what, these Islamists are coming over here with them.
No, conservatives, I mean, when you're talking about American politics, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not the Democrats that show up. I mean, they go out and protest, but they're not the ones holding town halls.
But there's another group coming in that is becoming very aggressive, and we have to be aware of that and recognize what it is we're up against.
Well, and his claim about setting up government grocery stores, it sounds ridiculous, and a lot of people have made fun of it. But what was one of the big arguments against Joe Biden? It was the price of groceries, right? When you're paying $7 and $8 for a dozen eggs, when you're paying, $6 and $7 for a gallon of milk. That was one of the big arguments against Joe Biden's inflation. So what does the Democratic Socialist do? He latches onto it and says, hey, your grocery prices are too high. Let me show you how we can lower them. But it's all the socialist agenda.
If I were going to control a population, I'd do three things. I'd take away their guns. I would take control of their health care. And then I would take control of their food.
You sound a lot like Stuart Chase and Karl Marx and Vladimir Lenin. Wait a minute. You mean this agenda has been going on for a really long time? Well, the truth is, my friends, it's the same playbook. You just got to recognize it in a different costume. That's all it is. It's the emperor has no clothes. Well, now, one of the big issues this week has been redistricting in Texas. But you're not really being told why the Democrats are so terrified. And, if you think that gerrymandering, which we talked about a little about it yesterday, if you think that it only happens with Democrats, well, you're wrong. Both parties are guilty of gerrymandering. It's what most people in the media call gerrymandering, but it's named after Eldridge Gerry, the first guy that created a legislative district that was really crazy. And by the way, I've got some slides to show you. Let me just give you some examples of gerrymandering. So go ahead and throw this one up, Ken. Oh, let me go. Let's see here. Slideshow. There we go. Okay, so it's a map of Illinois, and you can see the Democrat districts, and they're all pulled together. There we go. All right. It's Friday, Ken. It's all right. We don't have to do everything right. So you'll notice the Democrat districts, and they're all of crazy different shapes. Well, what happens there is politicians create these shapes when they redistrict to maximize the amount of Democrat or political party representation. It's not just Democrats in a given state. And it happens in Wyoming, too. And let me just give you an example here of a district that Agent 29 should be, very familiar with. So there in the middle is Ken's legislative district. Look at the crazy shape and tell me that we don't do gerrymandering.
It's an ice skating duck.
It does kind of look like an ice skating
duck.
duck.
Hockey playing duck.
Yeah. So tell me that wasn't done intentionally to, to maximize liberal votes. It absolutely was. Now, if you listen to the redistricting meetings that happened in 2020 and 2021, those folks will tell you, well, this is how we have to do it. We have to draw it this way to agree with the court ruling. The one person, one vote thing. Well, let me give you another one here. Show this one. This is the eastern edge of House District 43 in Laramie County. You want to know what's in that little box? That's Dan Zwanitzer's neighborhood. So he was in charge of the Corporations Committee during redistricting, and he had moved. Remember, I told you he had moved from House District 43 to House District 10, which is on the west side of that map. And he drew his own neighborhood back into House District 43 so he could keep his seat, until he got beat.
To see her pay no attention to that man behind the curtain, no wrongdoing.
Yeah, and to find that out, what I had to do was go to his address and his new address and zoom all the way in on the redistricting map. And most people aren't going to do that. Legislators didn't do that. And you zoom all the way in, and there's this little box drawn around Dan Zwanitzer's neighborhood. So don't tell me that we don't engage in gerrymandering. We absolutely do. Here's a picture of the entire state of Wyoming. And, largely most of the districts are pretty blocky. I mean, which is what you should have, right? There's some jagged edges, but, you have to get the right amount of people in the right district. But by and large, it's pretty well the same. Except, of course, House District 29, which is so small you can't see how it's drawn on this map. And there are some others that have some crazy shapes to them. But by and large, I mean, not too bad. I mean, I know that there were a lot of charges of, gerrymandering during redistricting. But, by and large, not too bad when you compare it with other states.
Yeah, I've always said I was the first conservative to serve in that particular district. And it wasn't that many years ago that it was split differently. But it does say something about who's active in Wyoming politics and who's voting when a conservative such as I wins a district such as that.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. So the other thing to remember is it was Republicans who were in charge during redistricting. And then, Republicans have always been in charge. But how then did you end up with things like District 29, House 43 that got Dan Zwanitzer's new house in it? How did you get all those things? Well, the Redcoats were in charge. So here's a piece from the Daily Wire. It's entitled, "The Real Reason Democrats Are Panicking About Redistricting." Quote, "One of the worst kept secrets in the government is that pretty much all of the data we have is really just an estimate at best. And that estimate is usually wrong. The approximate number of illegal aliens in this country has been locked at 11 million for roughly 20 years, which is a pretty big clue that the number is a gigantic lie. And when we learned the other day that the jobs report was supposedly wrong by hundreds of thousands of jobs, it was yet another indicator that the people who compile important data are, at a minimum, just winging it. More likely, they're committing fraud, and it's all pretty obvious. What you may not know, even though it's a very big deal, is that the U.S. Census is just as inaccurate as every other government data dump. And this matters a great deal because the census determines how many seats each party receives in the House of Representatives. And as a result of a massive counting error that took place in 2020, Democrats have several more seats in Congress than they actually deserve. To be clear, Democrats already receive a massive advantage in the census because illegal aliens are counted, because the U.S. Constitution doesn't say that you count every U.S. citizen. It says you count every person. And so even illegal aliens in the country are counted. And in Wyoming, and this is a great source of controversy, just wait another 5 years and you'll see it again, but the prison in Rawlins is counted as well. Felons can't vote. And if you're in the penitentiary in Rawlins, you can't vote either. But still, those people are counted in that legislative district. Now, no one really thinks about this, but it's very well documented, and it's uncontroversial. Even NPR ran a story admitting this. Here's a number of statistics for you. Hawaii was overcounted by 6.8%. meaning, according to the Census Bureau, that some people may have been counted in error more than once, and that number is 6.8%. In New York, a population of 19 million people, it was overcounted by 3.4%, which is something like 700,000 people, which just so happens to be the size of an entire congressional district. Weird. Massachusetts was overcounted by 2.2%, Minnesota by 3.8%. Delaware and Rhode Island were also overcounted. And Texas, and here is why the Democrats are so terrified. It was undercounted by 2%, which means those Democrat districts, a lot of people were not counted because it was the Democrats who were in charge of the census, or in that state anyway. Florida was miscounted by 3.5, Mississippi by 4, Tennessee by 5, and Arkansas by 5%. Now, these discrepancies are not normal. In fact, in the 2010 census, the Bureau found that 0 states were undercounted or overcounted. But in 2020, all of a sudden, the census was extremely inaccurate. And what do you know? The inaccuracy benefited the Democrat Party in Congress because they picked up several seats that they didn't deserve. But when he was asked about this, the census director said, "No census is perfect." In other words, deal with it, Jack. It's just a fact of life that Democrats get a significant number of extra seats in Congress. And this has been a story the last couple of days where even in very liberal states, like Massachusetts is one of them, where, I mean, there are a tremendous amount of Republicans. In fact, Trump got a pretty good percentage of the vote. But in some of these states, guess how many Republicans they have in Congress? 0, which means it is a result of the counting of the census and gerrymandering. So whether you choose to believe that the census is right or is a mistake or not, it doesn't really matter. The fact that Republicans have systematically been cheated out of representation of Congress is, I mean, it's almost a fact. To be clear, I'm not talking about gerrymandering, which means, and which we just talked about. After all, someone has to draw the maps at the end of the day, and it's simply impossible to find a truly nonpartisan person to do the job. And if you doubt that, take a look at California, which supposedly has a nonpartisan procedure for drawing districts. Republicans took 40% of the vote in Congress in the last election, but they won just 12 seats, while Democrats took home 40. So, my friends, it is both parties who engage in gerrymandering, but it is Democrats that almost always benefit. And in a state like Wyoming, well, it's the redcoats that benefit. Just look at Ken's district, one that was intentionally drawn that way. And, it's Ken's district is right in the middle of downtown. And so, it's the population density is pretty high, but still, it could have very, very easily been drawn in blocks, and it just, it would have been fine. But they didn't. They drew the duck, the ice skating duck. Now, Ken, did you attend any of the redistricting meetings during 2021, 2020, 2021?
I did not. I have a life.
Hey, thanks. Well, the reason I ask is redistricting meetings were they try to hold them in like every town. It doesn't exactly work out that way, but it was obvious that the redcoats, including Bo Beitman, you hear what I said, including Bo Beitman, intentionally tried to screw Mark Jennings out of part of the most conservative part of his district. It didn't work, but they intentionally tried to do it, and they were blatant about it. I was in the meeting when they were talking about it.
I think that's one of the reasons I didn't go, because I had heard some groundswell about what was going to happen. But you just take that District 29, the ice skating duck, and if you erase that for a minute and say, let's start from scratch. You have I use the word metropolitan rather loosely, but you've got a more densely populated area, which always tends to be, because of the way people are, more left. Instead of having 30 and 51 being almost all rural with a little bit of town, and the parts of town that they have tend to be fairly conservative, just better sections. Right. To me, the idea would be, let's take this 29 and let's give a little bit to each of these three. So we have a little bit of urban and a little bit of rural in each of these, and we're going to have a better mix. But I think the attitude
it's
was the only way we're going to get any representation from the Democrats is to have this one really
weird looking district.
district.
Well, and it all goes down to the number of people that live there. So each legislative district, at least in Wyoming, is 10,000. The House is about 10,000 citizens, and so for every 10,000, give or take a few. I mean, I think that you can have a deviation of plus or minus 4%. And so, some districts end up being a little bit more represented than others, like Johnson County, House District 40. That's one of those. There's just not the amount of people that live there. And so they're a little bit overrepresented. But you have to have the representation there. But it's a question of who that representation benefits. And if you look, and let me just make it a little bit bigger here from current slide. Okay. So the big one up in Sheridan County, 51. And then there's 29. 51 is mostly urban. It's Ranchester, Dayton, the northern part of Sheridan County. 29 is in the middle.
And 30.
And 30.
But you can't see a 30 there.
Yeah, it doesn't show it. But 30 is the bigger portion of it up there in Sheridan. And then 40 is also, about a third of Sheridan County too. So anyway, I mean, gerrymandering happens all over. But the question is, why exactly are the Democrats so terrified in Texas? Well, it's because of the census, because it was screwed up in 2020 and they have way more seats than they actually deserve. And so the Democrats, in an attempt to prevent a vote on redistricting, hightailed it out of there. Now, how did that happen? Well, there is a Texas Republican Representative, Brian Harrison. Now, he used to be in the Trump administration, and he did an interview with Breitbart News the other day, and he pointed out that the Texas legislature is really run by Democrats, thanks to the rhinos. Now, I've got a piece of sound. It's kind of long, but we're going to go ahead and listen to it. Now, tell me, we might do a stop and start on this one, but go ahead and play it, Ken. Tell me if any of this sounds familiar. Go ahead and hit play.
This is what a national audience doesn't quite understand this. I mean, that the reality is it's not just the story that the Democrats flew the coop and to thwart our ability to redistrict and broke quorum. The real story that's getting missed here is that Republican leadership in Texas allowed them to do it. The media is covering this like this quorum break started only 3 days ago. That's not true. The quorum break started last Wednesday when all the Democrats were in Austin. They were on the floor of the House. We had a quorum. We had the maps filed in the system, but our rhino speaker adjourned the body, released the Democrats, knowing they were going to go meet with Hakeem Jeffries, who flew down here from D.C. to strategize with them. So the quorum break actually was done with the full assistance of the supposedly Republican leadership in the Texas House. And that's one of the big untold stories here.
So
but
pause right
we
there.
can't go.
So, I mean, did you hear what he said? That the Speaker of the House knew what the Democrats were going to do, knew that they were going to go meet with the Democrat leader in the U.S. House of Representatives, Hakeem Jeffries. He knew that. So he adjourned the meeting. Instead of just recessing it, which would have kept all the Democrats there, he adjourned the meeting and let them go. Now, it wasn't that long ago, a few years ago, they had a similar fight going on, and they locked the doors on the House of Representatives so that the Democrats couldn't leave, that they had to be there to do their job. And so the only way that the Democrats could prevent the vote was to leave the state. Here's why: because the Speaker of the House can get the Texas Rangers, their state police, to go bring the Democrats back to the House of Representatives, and that can be done in Wyoming too. In fact, one issue that happened there, it was Anthony Bouchard. He didn't want to vote, and so he left the floor of the Wyoming Senate, and they sent the sergeant at arms to go get him and bring him back to force him to vote. That was, I don't know, that was like 5 years ago, maybe 6. But that's why the Democrats had to leave the state, because if they stayed inside Texas, the Texas State Police could go grab them and bring them back to the state capitol and force them to vote. So that's why they went to Illinois, which ironically is the most gerrymandered state in the union. But the reason they left the state, the reason why they're so terrified, is because they know that there was something hinky going on with the 2020 census. Now, here, this next part of the soundbite, He's going to describe what happens in the Texas legislature. This is the part where I want you to tell me if this sounds at all familiar. Hit play.
Back in time and undo the rhino assist with this quorum break. They need to be punished. They need to be arrested. And they need to be brought back now, or their seats need to be vacated.
Well, what's that about? What is what you just described?
The rhino leadership down here?
Yeah. How did he get the job, and why would he do something?
Listen very close.
Well, this is going to make your mind explode. So, like, just by way of background, I had the honor of serving as a senior member of President Trump's administration in his first term. And when I moved back to my beloved state of Texas in January of 21, I got elected to the Texas legislature a few months later. And nothing could have prepared me for the shock of what I was going to learn, which is that even though people think Texas is this bastion of republicanism, and our voters are Republican, our voters are conservative. Texas reelected Trump with a 14-point landslide. Here's the truth that almost no one outside of Texas knows. The Texas legislature is run by Democrats, and primarily the Texas House is controlled by Democrats. And how can that be? Despite Republicans having a 26-seat majority in the Texas House, the Democrat caucus is who selects the speaker in the Texas House, because we have about 30 or so rhinos that cut a deal with the entire Democrat caucus. This has been going on almost 2 decades now. And so the Democrat caucus picks the speaker, and then the 30 Republicans that cut that deal with them, they all get to become the chairmanship. So it would literally be like if Hakeem...
Wait a minute. No, that's impossible, David. That could never happen.
Never seen that happen.
No. What he just said... And maybe if you could back it up about halfway and listen to it again, because I kind of interrupted him. We're not going to get it exact, but go ahead and hit play again.
On almost 2 decades now. And so the Democrat caucus picks the speaker, and then the 30 Republicans that cut that deal with them, they all get to become the chairmanship. So it would literally be like if Hakeem Jeffries cut a deal with 6 or 7 Republicans in the U.S. Congress to let him pick the speaker, and then they would be Ways and Means chairman or Energy and Commerce chairman, those 7 rhinos. That is literally what happens in the Texas legislature. It's been going on over 15 years now. And so the speaker of the Texas House, even though he's a nominal Republican, he was the candidate for speaker put up by the Democrat caucus.
There you go.
So this is it's one of the most underreported scandals in America.
Okay.
Exactly right.
Cernovich has made the point many times that
that's the end of
people
it. So his point is that it's the redcoats and the Democrats in the Texas legislature that picked the Speaker of the House. Now, if that doesn't sound familiar to you, let me explain. It's the redcoats and the Democrats in the Wyoming Senate that picked the Senate president. And the deal they cut is that they would get the chairmanships. They would get 7 out of the 10 committees. And so it's not just Wyoming where this sort of stuff happens. Now, keep in mind, I was told that I was crazy, that could never happen. Yeah, well, it happens in other states too. And, I thought we were supposed to do Wyoming solutions for Wyoming problems. It seems that the redcoats, well, they do that too, when they need to get power. And that is exactly what happened. So we're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll continue with the program.
Ever since gold backing was removed from the dollar, the value has dropped significantly over the past few decades. Experts say this is one of the main reasons goods are more expensive and your savings are worth less each year. How would you know how many dollars to save for retirement if the valuation of the dollar changes over time? Would you work all week for that $20 gold piece? Let's look at the valuation of this coin from the 1970s to today. When President Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, this coin traded for about $275. Today, it trades for about $14,000. Buying and holding rare coins using only a fraction of your portfolio is our suggested way to save for the future. Call U.S. Coin Capital at 1-800-878-2646 to get your free United States Gold and Silver Buyer's Guide.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Welcome to Lessons in Civility by Morton Buildings. Gentlemen, is your garage completely jam-packed full of all of your unnecessary crap? And your lovely wife has been on your tail, nagging you nonstop to clean it out? It's not because she just wants to incessantly irritate you. Chivalry dictates that you should clear out a space so she can park her car inside and you don't end up sleeping on the couch anymore. To do that, contact Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Not only are they the experts in metal building construction, they're also skilled at keeping you out of the doghouse. One more time, their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. This has been Lessons in Civility from Morton Buildings. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live. It's Open Line Friday. If you got something that you want to talk to me about, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989 is the number here in the studio. Now, we mentioned earlier that there are, oh, that's not the right one. Let's see here. That there are some new Democrats in the Wyoming House. And, you know, we all knew it. It's not like this was a big surprise. But if you look at this book, let's see here. There we go. I'll bring it up here. So if you look at that book, the Wyoming Rural Water Membership Directory, you're going to find a number of interesting things in there. And let me just show you here. Let's see if I can do this. Nope, that's the Sturgis rally. Here we go. All right. So some of the Democrats. Oh, look, J.T. Larson. Democrat, according to the membership directory of the Wyoming Rural Water Guide. And then there's Cody Wiley, another Democrat, which, I mean, if you pay any attention to these folks' voting record, they really are Democrats. They're just masquerading as Republicans because it's easier for them to get elected. And this is one of those things that we just know.
It also included Lee Filer, who was a Democrat last time he was up.
Yes. Well, Lee Filer, I mean, he's a Democrat anyway, if you just look at his voting record. Anyway, so there you go. New Democrats. And we were just talking about how the Democrat Party needs to be more involved and have more representation. Well, there you go. They already have it. And I'm speaking ironically, but the truth is, the Democrat Party, just like it happens in Texas, has an outsized influence because there are a number of redcoats in the Republican Party that they claim to be Republican, but that's only so that they can get elected. So, that's exactly what happens here. And if you ever have any questions as to why the Democrats get their way a lot more, and it doesn't happen anymore because, well, I guess it does in the Senate, which is why we don't get a whole heck of a lot done, namely the supplemental budget. which, by the way, don't let me forget, Agent 29, that I do have some very interesting video about the supplemental budget. When that topic comes up again, I have some pretty shocking video taken from one of my beautiful undercover cameras.
Sounds like an oxymoron when you say interesting and budget in the same sentence.
Yeah, well, if you're me, some of the things that happen in the budget are kind of interesting. Well, a lot of times we hear that there's a fact checker. If you're on social media, you see, fact checks all the time. Independent fact checkers have said that your comment is false, which, we've all seen that, but different media outlets, they have their own fact checkers too. And the former Washington Post fact checker, he complains that the outlet has not been liberal enough. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but a fact is a fact. It doesn't have a political affiliation to it. It's not your truth and my truth. Facts just are. Let's see, I think this is from the Daily Wire. But anyway, former Washington Post fact checker complains that the outlet wasn't liberal enough. And I quote, former Washington Post editor Glenn Kessler, who had written the fact checker since 2011, expressed dismay on Tuesday that the outlet was becoming less left-leaning. The Post decided not to endorse a 2024 presidential candidate in October, and its owner, Jeff Bezos, announced in February that the outlet's opinion section would focus on defending personal liberties and free markets. Kessler, in a Substack piece, criticized both moves as repelling the Post's left-wing leadership. Quote, while it would be great to get a more balanced mix of liberal and conservative readers, I didn't understand how one could attract conservative readers without alienating existing readers, Kessler wrote. The Post opinion pages already had an array of liberal, conservative, and libertarian voices, and that's not the same as the news pages. The Washington Post news division prides itself on accountability, whatever. Have you ever read the Washington Post? There's nothing in there that is... Well, it's been such a long time since I picked one up, but there's rarely anything in there that is even nonpartisan or fair and balanced or anything. Now, this Glenn Kessler guy, he's on the editorial board, and he's the guy that ran the fact checker. Here's just one of them. Mike Johnson's bogus attack on the CBO's score of the 2017 tax bill. All right, so the criticism of the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, has been the same as it always has been, in that they don't engage in dynamic accounting, a dynamic spend, taking an account of spending and revenue. So what they did is they just looked at Trump's 2017 tax cuts, and they just assumed that was spending, because that was a lower amount of money that they were able to spend. And so in the dynamic scoring of the bill, they didn't look at all the money that was coming in because of the tax cuts. They didn't include any of that. And so it looked to be that the big, beautiful law was going to create this gigantic deficit. And so Glenn Kessler, the fact checker at the Washington Post, was in and of itself biased from the very beginning. So you really can't trust any of this. And the reason why I bring this up is that you need to do your own research. There are a number of media outlets, and let me just give you a great example. In Wyoming, most of them are very left-leaning. How many places have you seen a discussion of what Chairman Jim Anderson did in the Minerals Committee? That he swore at constituents, that Ogden, have you seen anywhere that Ogden Driscoll broke decorum and attacked individual members of the committee? Have you seen that anywhere except on this program? I'm sure you've seen it online. I'm sure that there's been a lot of people posting about it. But has the Cowboy written an article about it? Or the Tribune Eagle? Or the Pravda on the Platte? Or Wildfile? Have any of them even mentioned what happened in that Minerals Committee? Well, no. Because, they're of the opinion that if they don't report on it, you won't know about it, and it may as well have just never happened. So the media, and I think that everybody intuitively knows this, is just demonstrably left-leaning. There's no question about it. And, It's fascinating to me that these fact checker people, or folks that used to be employed, that now they're coming out and saying, well, I mean, it's obvious that you should have seen this. Like Jake Tapper in his stupid book. Oh, they covered up that Biden's mental capacity was declining. Well, no S, Sherlock. I mean, of course it was. Ray Charles could have seen that. But now all these folks that are now out of a job, well, they have to regain some relevance. And so the only thing that they have left is to point out their own hypocrisy, which is wonderfully fun to me.
You keep saying Ray Charles could have seen that. We're going to have to send you for some sensitivity training.
Yeah, why is that?
You're obviously not very sensitive toward people with blind issues.
No, I'm not.
Yeah. Speaking of somebody with an issue, and I just want to throw this out, frankly, as a prayer request, our friend Mike, who happens to be a county commissioner, had an argument with his bailer and was involuntarily amputated a fair portion of his left hand.
Yeah. So he lost three fingers on his left hand, and he lost part of his index finger. And so if you could just pray for him, I would really appreciate it. He's a rancher, and so he's got a long road to go. So just please pray for him, and that he makes a speedy recovery, and that and here's, and I'm not going to tell you who, but there have been a lot of people who've pitched in to help out at his place, feeding his animals and taking care of his place because he can't. So thank you to those people. It's that's a tough one, man. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I'm not a rancher, man. I don't like tangling with balers and.
Well, let me just say that table saws can also have a number of
That's true.
So I have a certain empathy for our friend Mike.
Yep. You did have an argument with the table saw and didn't win. From the Daily Caller, whistleblower alleges that John Brennan had a pathological need for control and corrupted the Trump-Russia investigation. Now, there's more and more news coming out about, and I don't even know if news is the right word, but more and more is coming to light about Obamagate and the Russia investigation, and that John Brennan and James Clapper pretty much ran that whole thing. This is from the Daily Caller. Quote, a Central Intelligence Agency analyst, co-author of the 2017 Intelligence Community Assessment, which tied then-President-elect Donald Trump to the allegations of Russian interference, claimed that former CIA Director John Brennan controlled the ICA's contents and dissemination. And so, just to refresh your memory on this, the first ICA that came in basically said that, Trump didn't have anything to do with Russia. Was Russia trying to interfere in the election? Yeah. But they didn't possess the technological capability to influence any election results. So were they trying to mess around? Yeah. Was Trump doing anything with them? No. And when that report came to the Obama White House, Brennan, Obama, Clapper, all those people, magically, that intelligence assessment got changed to say that, actually, they did have an involvement. Weird how that happens. The whistleblower asserted that former CIA officer Susan Miller, who previously claimed involvement in the ICA, had no role in it whatsoever. And so they're saying that people had involvement in it that weren't even around. And all of this is an attempt to just obfuscate everything that's good, to muddy the water so that you don't know what's true and what's not. And these are people in the intelligence community, so they're masters at doing this. I mean, this is what they do for a living. John Brennan's pathological need for control was one of the key corruptions with the ICA process and the Fusion cell. What they're talking about, Fusion, is Fusion GPS, the outfit that put out the Steele dossier. The whistleblower alleged the Fusion Cell was a group of analysts. It was also a group of analysts and representatives from various intelligence agencies that included drafters of the ICA. So, just the timeline here: Hillary Clinton greenlights the Steele dossier. Christopher Steele puts it all together. It's all a bunch of bogus crap. None of it can be verified whatsoever. It gets returned to Hillary Clinton. And then, weird, the FBI gets a hold of it, and John Brenner and James Clapper. The FBI then uses the Steele dossier to get FISA warrants on the Trump campaign to spy on them. So an apocryphal document was used as the basis for a legal warrant to spy on the president. And then the media firestorm happened. All of this stuff was leaked to the media. And really, it was the media that drove this entire thing. There's I've mentioned this a couple times on the show, but there's a pretty good timeline that was put out by Glenn Beck. And if you go to his Blaze TV, you can find it. I mean, he lays out the timeline, and once you see it, it's pretty clear about what they did. However, senior CIA officials reportedly restricted the team's access to information and, quote, refused to allow outside analytics experts within the Directorate of Analysis. So this is a division inside the CIA that monitors all of this, that verifies, fact checks and stuff, to review either the ICA itself or the underlying source reporting, neglecting a critical check that typically exists in analytics production. So these are the people that find out whether the information they're receiving is true or not. Now, because of the isolation of these folks, there was no way to stress test the reporting and either validate it or rule it out. So essentially, what this piece is saying is that John Brennan removed the ability to verify the Steele dossier and to find out if it was true or not. And so then the Steele dossier was used in the FISA warrants, and then, the Russia Gate and Obama Gate and all of that happened. So, I mean, it's just more and more information that's coming out. And, all of us, we need to be aware of this. Not that we don't already know who these people are, but it's important to know the depths of the deception that was happening during the Obama administration, and frankly during the Joe Biden administration too, and during Trump's administration. I mean, this thing has gone on for almost well over a decade, and so I mean, this is I once said that the auto pen scandal was the biggest controversy. I think this one's probably bigger. Now, another item in the news is all of Trump's tariffs, and you pretty much hear media outlets every day talking about this. But they are prompting big companies to make huge investments in our country. And one of those is Apple. And this just shows the lack of knowledge with our trade representatives for the last, 10, 15 years, that they really have no idea what they're doing, that an American company, Apple, arguably one of the largest companies in the world, doesn't manufacture its stuff in America. They ship it to China and to other places. And, it's all business to them. It's not really that they, I'm sure that there are some America haters that work at Apple. But when you talk about big companies, it's all dollars and cents. And if you can produce your product for less money over here, logically you would do that.
I think it's shocking to me that they have never been able to figure out that America's where the money is.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say they, I'm talking about the pundits and the people on the other side, the people who are clutching their pearls because they say, oh, the tariffs are going to kill us. No market anywhere can do anything without us.
Absolutely.
We have to be involved. And so when we have somebody who understands business, understands how things are done, and he comes up and says, okay, we're not going to be taken advantage of anymore, he throws out through the Overton window his first offer and says, we're just going to run you out of business. They have to capitulate.
Yes,
they have no choice. And yet, how many so-called expert witnesses or authorities came out on every network and pulled their hair out saying these tariffs are going to destroy the country? No, they're saving the country.
Well, here's a great example. American meat products. And now there are 5 major companies, 5 main big meat packing companies in America that actually operate. But there are others that they take meat that is produced here, whether it's chickens or cows or pork or whatever, slaughter it here, ship it to another country, it gets packaged, and then shipped back. And in many cases, that's cheaper than producing it here because of all the regulations we have.
It's also the power of the unions.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if you produce a good at your house, I don't know, whatever it is, maybe you come up with a different spice recipe, for smoking your brisket or whatever. Well, to use it and to package it, you have to get FDA approval. even if you're just selling it downtown at your local farmers market, or in other states. We have the Food Freedom Act here in Wyoming, but in other states, you have to get FDA approval, and you have to tell them exactly what's in that thing, and then you get the little label that you see on just about everything. Well, here's the ridiculous part of it. If you change one of the sources of one of the spices, or if you change a spice, maybe it's just a different kind, tastes the same, just a different kind, you have to get approval all over again. And so what I'm getting at is the level of regulations are so high, or they were so high in America, that it's a lot cheaper for companies to produce their products overseas and then ship them back. Arguably, the largest portion of Apple's business is right here. And so what they're doing, they're producing their goods overseas for a cheaper price and then shipping them back. Well, Apple has decided to make a gigantic investment back here. And I quote from The Blaze. President Donald Trump is set to announce another win as a result of his tariff policies. According to reports on Wednesday, he will highlight another massive investment in American manufacturing, which is expected to benefit the economy and create jobs. The White House stated that Apple Incorporated is planning to commit another $100 billion to domestic production to circumvent Trump's tariffs, according to news outlets, including the New York Times and Bloomberg. Trump casually Man, I'm having a hard time talking today. It's like my tongue is tied up. Trump casually delivering the largest investment in Apple's entire history, like it's just another Wednesday afternoon, because there have been so many investments that have been made in America that, I mean, this is, the first couple of big ones, kind of raised my eyebrows, and I was like, ooh, that company's investing nearly $1 trillion. That's huge. But that's been happening so often that now the news of Apple, it's like, okay, it's another one. Good job, Trump. While Apple has not yet confirmed this latest plan, it has previously guaranteed that it would invest $500 billion or $500 billion and hire 20,000 people in the U.S. over the next 4 years. The technology company also has plans to open a 250,000 square foot factory in Houston, Texas, to produce servers that support its AI system. CEO Tim Cook stated last week that a call with analysts that the vast majority of the company's iPhones sold in the U.S. are produced in India. So they're not even produced here. Apple's other products, including MacBooks, iPads, watches, are manufactured in Vietnam. Quote, we obviously try to optimize our supply chain, Cook stated, and ultimately we will do more in the U.S. And one of those reports, I heard it yesterday, and maybe it's in this piece, but this investment is not iPhones. The iPhones are still going to be produced overseas. But still, and this is the ridiculous part of it. Are there some people that really don't like America that work at Apple? Yeah, I'm sure of it. But one of the largest American companies, we've created so many regulations that it makes it more expensive for them to produce their products here than in other countries. Now, I mean, admittedly, remember the big Nike controversy where the Uyghurs in China were being forced slave labor to produce Nike shoes. Okay, so Nike and Apple was accused of a similar situation. So there's less labor regulations in other countries. You can pay people pennies on the dollar to work, and not exactly ethical, but I guess if it's all dollars and cents. But the problem here, and I think this is symptomatic of a larger problem, is that we don't really have fair trade, or we don't really have free trade because of all the multiplicity of tariffs that are placed on American goods. And because we don't have free trade, it's not really fair. And it wasn't until Trump came into office and started talking about all the tariffs that came to light. But really, before Trump, we paid a tremendous amount more to sell American products overseas than, foreign companies, namely China, paid to sell their products here. And so American companies were at a distinct disadvantage. Well, Trump is trying to right that. And, I think that Apple, this is just another example of that. And honestly, Ken, I remember growing up where it was pretty easy to find goods that were made in the USA. I remember walking into the clothes store, and they always had a USA made rack. It was Curry's Clothier in Buffalo. They always had a rack of clothes that were made in the U.S. And yeah, they were all more expensive, but they were also of a better quality. it's a lot harder to find products that are actually manufactured here. Even, and this one, every time I see the ad, it makes me laugh. Allegiance Flag Supply. Most American flags are not made here. They're made over, in countries like China. How crazy is that? But if America is going to succeed, we have to produce and sell our goods here. And the only way that you can do that is if you have a tax environment that's favorable to business and if you lower regulations. If you get government out of the way, it's a lot easier to sell your products here, which, this leads right into another discussion of the Wyoming Business Council, one of your favorite drums to beat on, Ken. But, in Wyoming, even here, we have a tendency to try to pick winners and losers with business. One business gets a grant from the Business Council, while somebody who makes exactly the same thing has to compete against the government. It's stupid.
I want to pick on unions just a little bit. When unions came about, they were certainly needed because we had some pretty unsavory conditions in America. And they got things up to where things are safer, better, and then some. And they got it to the point where they have priced the American worker out of the market. And in so doing, they put much more pressure on countries that do not have those sorts of guidelines and protections. And we end up with child labor.
Yep.
We end up with all sorts of, the Uyghurs, for example. And so the very people that are trying to make life better for people are actually making it worse.
Absolutely. And it's, it's companies like Apple, and okay, so they're doing the right thing here, but they're not immune from all of these criticisms. Just like Nike, and producing their shoes with slave labor. But one of the reasons that they do that is it's all dollars and cents, and we got to make it profitable for companies to operate in the U.S. And just think about the steel industry, right? For the longest time, it was Pittsburgh Steel, and then pretty soon it was Japanese steel, Chinese steel that gets dumped on the market. And until Trump came along, most of the steel that we use in America, well, it was imported. How crazy is that?
In my trade, drywall was the one that got crazy. They started shipping in all kinds of China from drywall from China. And I got ear disease, I guess.
Yeah, well, it's Friday.
But it caused all kinds of problems. And we just need some sort of balance. We need to have an honest look at what we're doing, and we need to have a lot less government intervention, period.
Well, and there are so many examples of where, and it's not just Wyoming, every state does this. How often, I haven't seen one of these recently, but for a while, Amazon would open up one of their big distribution centers, and then whatever state, whatever county they were going to put it in, would give them gigantic tax breaks. And, just trying to incentivize them. Well, what about the other company? Where's their tax break? What do they have to do to get a little bit out? Well, the truth is, we should get the government out of the way. We'll have more when we come back. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday beginning at 8 a.m. pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Friday. I'm your host, David Iverson, doing what I was born to do each and every day, and doing it better than anybody else. I mean, I don't think there's any question here.
Hello again, and welcome to American Top 40. I'm Casey Kasem, and I want to thank Dave, debuting this week at number 36.
That's right, number 36, number 36. It doesn't even really matter. Nobody comes close to this program.
We need to check and see if there's an update, because you had moved up to 32, and I haven't looked for a while. So.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, it kind of bounces around. I mean, it's a rating site, so I mean, it's gonna change. Now, before the break, we were talking about how our country has not really incentivized American manufacturing for a really long time. I mean, I guess since President Trump was in the Oval Office the first time. But we've been this country has been run by Democrats and redcoats for so long that it makes sense when you look at American business, it makes sense that a lot of things aren't produced here. And it all boils down to how Democrats and Republicans, conservatives and redcoats view work. Now, I've got a little bit piece of a video off of Fox Business, and they're talking about Pocahontas and Zoran Mamdani, how they view work. But I think we can probably expand this to just how Democrats view work. But go ahead and play it, Ken.
What's happening is we're seeing an emergence of a left-wing populism to counter Donald Trump's right-wing populism. And the difference is this. It's in how you view labor and work. Donald Trump views labor and work as inherently dignified, which is where his whole immigration agenda comes from. If you allow millions of illegals to come into the country, it undercuts the value of the labor of the American worker. So if you love work and you think it gives dignity and you love America, you're going to have a right-wing populist model to try to protect the dignity of the labor of the American worker. Contrast that with Mamdaniism and now Elizabeth Warrenism. In their view, labor and work is inherently humiliating and undignified. We should allow millions of illegal workers to come in and undercut Americans in the labor force. Remember, Mamdani is anti-ICE. He fought Tom Homan in that clip. And you should then bolster the welfare state so that, these over-credentialed, downwardly mobile elites can stay at home in rent-controlled apartments and become podcasters. It's about work and it's about America. And those two things come together in how you view immigration.
All right, so it's how you view work. Now, we've been told for a really long time that there's just some jobs that Americans won't do. They're beneath them. You can't get Americans to go pick fruit. You can't get Americans to work in a meat packing plant. You can't get Americans to dig ditches, and that's why we have to have cheap labor. Well, none of that is really true. It was not that long ago that I brought you the story of the meat packing plant in Nebraska, that ICE raided it, and they arrested something like 70 some odd illegal aliens in there, and everybody freaked out. How are we going to get enough employees to run the meat packing plant? The very next day, the meatpacking plant was deluged with job applications from people that live there. The truth is, if you give Americans a chance to work, they will work. But we have a country that's been run by Democrat elites for so long that have never written a paycheck. They don't even know what it's like to run a company. They don't understand that that most companies operate on a pretty small profit margin. You heard Mom Donnie talking about grocery stores. The profit margin in a grocery store, I bet it's not any more than 2%. It's probably less than that. And, other companies, retail, you don't really make that much money if you own a retail business. The reason why you have the stores, you love what you do, and you make enough to keep the doors open and make a little bit of a living. The profit margin is not that high. And so when you when you add burdensome regulations on top of them, well, it makes it impossible to run your business. And if that's the case, well, then it's impossible to hire people. The truth is, my friends, that most people do not work for a big corporation. Most people work for small businesses. Now, it's true, you do have big employers like Walmart here in Sheridan County. There's a Walmart, and they have a pretty sizable workforce. But the biggest employer in Wyoming is not small business. It's government. Government is the biggest employer in Wyoming. And if you want to stack it up against other industries, most people would say that the number one industry in Wyoming is either coal mining or it's tourism. Well, that's not true. The number one industry in Wyoming is government. And when you look at the amount of people they employ and the amount of money that we put towards government, and it actually dwarfs the other two. Take, for example, Buffalo, Wyoming. I don't know the exact numbers, but I think a fair estimate is to say at least 70% of the population works for government. Let me just give you a list. There's the school. School districts always have a giant workforce. There's the city, the county, the U.S. Forest Service, the BLM, all government. And so when you add all of those employees up, it's a very sizable portion of the population. So the economic arrangement, the economic setup that we have is actually inverted from what it ought to be. A conservative viewpoint would say the government needs to remain small, that it needs to handle only those things that are enumerated to it, in the Constitution, both the state and the federal. And we really shouldn't be handling all this other stuff. We don't have any business being in healthcare. We don't have any business in business development. In fact, I would argue that it's impossible for government to create business development. Okay, so they get a hit out of every once in a while. But there's only a couple of those business parks that government paid for that actually work. One of them happens to be here in Sheridan. But there are other places where government has spent millions, tens, hundreds of millions of dollars building business parks that don't even work. And the best example of that is one in Buffalo, Wyoming. I don't know how many millions they spent on it. I think it was the number 10 million sticks in my head, but there's never been a single offer for any piece of property out there. But that's an example of, hey, look, we'll create this business park, government will pay for it, and then a business will come in there. Well, it doesn't work. And let me explain why it's impossible for government to create business development. Now, let's say that Agent 29 gets a job working for WYDOT. Not that he would want to. He would probably quit if it actually happened. But we're just saying, hypothetically speaking, let's say that you, Agent 29, you get a job working for WYDOT. Well, that works out pretty good for you. I mean, you've got a high wage, you've got benefits, your hours are probably pretty good. You're not having to produce a show with all of your free time. Hey, this is great, and you're actually making money. Now, the problem comes in is when you take your WYDOT paycheck and Ken goes to the grocery store, he's able to buy all the groceries he needs for he and Diane and whenever Sarah and the grandkids show up to visit. Perfect. He can buy all of that. But he's really not generating any new revenue for that grocery store. Why? Because it's recycled tax dollars. The amount of money that Ken makes through his WYDOT paycheck is money that has been already taken out of Wyoming citizens' pockets through taxes. And so it's just a recycling of those tax dollars. There's nothing new that's being created. For business to expand, you have to have new businesses crop up. Somebody creates a new product, a new service. There's something different in the marketplace. Maybe somebody opens a bakery, and there's new yummy things to eat. Those are things that didn't exist in the market before. So it's in addition to the economic base that already existed before. Ken's job at WYDOT doesn't contribute anything new to the economy. And let me just kind of broaden this out a little bit for you. Remember the 1990s .com boom, where there were websites popping up all over the place and the stock market had valued them at these ridiculously overinflated prices? Well, the reason that crashed is these websites aren't producing any products. They didn't produce anything except, of course, their own website. And so the only commodity they had to trade was their website. There was nothing contributing to the economy. And so that bubble burst when it became clear that there was no new economic development there. And so when government gives out grants through the Wyoming Business Council or any other so-called economic development outfit, it's just your tax dollars that go towards, whatever business. And then you complicate the matter because other businesses that might compete with the one that government is trying to create, they don't get those benefits. And so they have to compete in the free market and overcome the amount of tax dollars that are given to their competitor, which, I mean, it puts them at a disadvantage. And if you want to know why there are so many empty storefronts across Wyoming small towns, that's one of the big reasons why, because government is picking winners and losers.
Yeah, that's one of the factors that often gets overlooked in this discussion. And we had, you remember in Buffalo a while back, there's a guy there that has a private gymnasium.
Yeah.
And we had this great idea, we're going to raise tax and we're going to give a bunch of money to the Y.
Yep.
Every time we do something like that, when we pick winners and losers, yeah, the winner wins, but doesn't create anything new. And the people that actually are creating something new get hurt, and it's more and more difficult for them to survive. So it's actually counterproductive. And I'll tell you, for everything you said about Buffalo is true for Thermopolis.
It's true for just about every
place around there. And last comment with what we've been talking about, the size of government being the largest employer. The one city in Wyoming that is truly doing well, come hell or high water, is Cheyenne.
Oh yeah.
Continually, fastest growing city and lowest unemployment rates and all that stuff. And all it is a giant leech.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you want to find a crane, all you have to do is go to Cheyenne because it's government that's paying for all of it. Okay, so a big data center comes in. All right, so it's probably not government paying for the data center, but ask yourself, why is that data center in Cheyenne? Why isn't it in Sheridan or Cody or Riverton or Lander? Why is it Cheyenne?
Look at the power that's required to run that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you have to increase capacity, you have to increase your ability to deliver. It is the policy for utilities in Wyoming to distribute that amongst the people that are already paying for it, rather than have the industry that comes in pay to provide its own hookup. They spread it out.
Yeah, they make you pay for it.
Yeah, when it's a small business that comes in, that actually works fairly well because nobody really gets hurt. But they come in there now and they want to use 3 times the power that's already available. What you've just done is jack up the price of water, you've jacked up the price of electricity, and everything else that's already there. And the theory is, well, you're going to create more people, more income for the area, and that'll catch up. But there's going to be a lag in there, and there's an issue. To me, an outfit like that comes in, fine, if you want to come in and do that, but you need to front your own costs.
Well, let me give you a hometown example that most people would probably understand. New developments, right? Hopefully in your community, there's somebody that wants to build a new housing development. They've bought a piece of property outside of town and they've got this vision of building a whole bunch of houses, and it's going to be great. They're going to have a great view of the mountains and beautiful homes and maybe a playground for all the kids. It's going to be amazing. And they con the county commissioners into paying for the infrastructure to run out to their new community because they're putting up houses. Why shouldn't taxpayers pay for that?
Don't forget the community art.
Oh yeah, the community art. I'll get to that in just a second. Yeah, you always do this to me, and what Agent 29 is trying to get me to do is to talk about this pile of garbage that's right out by the corner here, the bumper tower. That's a whole nother issue, another waste of taxpayer dollars.
My job is to push buttons. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, and he does a good job at them. But here's the question. If you are wanting to build your own housing development and you are going to make money off the houses and you are going to make money off of selling the land, why should I have to pay for the water, the sewer, and the electric to be run out to your housing development. I shouldn't. In fact, you should pay for it. Now, if you go put a water tap out in front of your house, maybe you've put up another building, whatever, guess who has to pay for that? You do.
Yeah, and in the case that we're talking about there, it actually isn't long-term the developer. He's taking the risk off the
Sure.
bat. But he's going to make that back when he sells it to whoever comes in and actually uses the power.
Exactly right. But how many developments, the first stop they make is at the county commissioners meeting and say, I need you to run water out to, this development. There's one that's happening right east of town right now. I mean, there's excavators up on the hill digging ditches as fast as they can dig them. Guess who's footing the bill for that? It's you, right? Why is it not the developer? You see, it's just another example of government getting in the middle of private business. And if you want to know why it's so hard to start a business, this is one of the big reasons that you have to compete with government because of idiotic schemes. And it is a scheme like the Wyoming Business Council. I mean, and it's, I know there's a lot of people who have gotten grants from it, but really, that's taxpayer dollars. That's you and me paying for your own personal business. I mean, I find the whole thing infuriating, and it's not free trade. And the truth is, if you let business alone, business will prosper. But the reason why you have empty storefronts down on your main street, and maybe not in Sheridan, Main Street, the storefronts are almost always pretty well full. But if you go to other towns like Thermopolis or Buffalo or Worland's a good example, man. It's like a whole side of the street when there's not a single business in there. Well, it's because government gets involved. And, and again, most people work for a small business. They're the largest employer in America outside of government. If you reduce the size of government, those folks have to go find a job elsewhere, and they'll either go work for somebody or they'll start their own business. But, when government gets in the middle of all this stuff, you don't have a situation where it's free trade or even fair trade. You have to compete against the government. It's like that guy that owns the private gym in Buffalo, man, Tucker. I mean, he put it so succinctly at that rally that, he's being forced to compete with government.
Well, the Wyoming Business Council's idea is to add another layer of government.
Yeah.
And now, they're concerned, the latest pushes, they're very concerned with, we're exporting all of our workers. And yeah, there are numbers that say that. Well, how long has the Wyoming Business Council been here? And what have they done up till now? But it comes back to that same old thing. Government created a lot of these problems. And we look around and we say, there's a problem. We need government to fix it. It's a continual cycle, just like a toilet.
Well, it's a self-licking ice cream cone, as Troy McEwen often puts it, right? You have government create a problem, and then the only group that can solve that problem is government. Well, it's government that created the problem in the first place. And so it's just more and more of your tax dollars that get funneled down the drain. All right. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left, and I've got a story here that, while it is not specifically about Wyoming, it does relate to it. It's from The Blaze. Democrat state senator remains committed to alerting illegal aliens of ICE raids in her state. Let me just read you the opening paragraphs of this, and then I'll tell you how this relates to Wyoming. Quote, Arizona State Senator Annalise Ortiz has been using her social media platforms to alert illegal aliens of federal immigration enforcement operations in the state, and she remains committed to continuing the practice. On X, Libs of TikTok posted a screenshot of Ortiz's Instagram story where she shared the date, time, and address of suspected activity from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. In response to Lott's call for the federal government to charge her, Ortiz replied, quote, yep, when ICE is around, I will alert my community to stay out of the area, and I'm not effing scared of you nor the Trump-masked goons. It appears she may be in violation of federal law. Weird. You alert the subject of a criminal investigation that the investigation is happening, and yeah, that's absolutely against the law. Let's see here. So I mean, you get the gist of it. But this happens in Wyoming, and it is the Jackson Hole News and Guide is the one that comes to mind. The last few times that ICE has been conducting operations in Jackson or in Teton County, it is the Jackson Hole News and Guide that's been alerting their readers to, hey, ICE is in the area. and they usually put it up on their website. They are intentionally interfering with a law enforcement investigation, and it's because the News and Guide is run by a bunch of wacko liberals. I mean, have you ever tried to pick up and read that thing? I mean, it's I put it in the category of publications that I read just because I want to hear the other side. But I mean, when they're yeah, just like the Pravda on the Platte. By the way, they're almost entirely irrelevant now. I mean, it has been so long since I have seen anything come out of the Casper Star Tribune that's of any value whatsoever. My advice: somebody ought to buy that thing and rename it and actually run it like a newspaper. Just a thought.
I think the cow pie is doing that too. Look at how much trouble they're having in holding on to any political correspondence.
Yeah, they got a new guy now. I haven't seen much from him. But the cow pie's got other issues. One that they're run by a bunch of liberals, but the other one, I mean, it's Wyoming journalism, man. And what we need is a new way to get news out to Wyoming citizens that's actually going to publish stories that are fair and balanced. Just the news, man. I mean, just tell me what's going on.
Find a need and fill it, David.
Yeah, well, I've been thinking about that, and in the coming days and weeks, I'm going to tell you more about what I've got planned. But like Ken said, you find a need and you fill it, and you'll be successful. All you got to do is work hard and apply yourself and come up with a need in the market. Now, I meant to talk about this earlier in the program. It's been a long time since we've had a Things That Go Boom segment, but this one, I'm assuming you saw the shooting that happened at the military base. And there's a lot of stuff online that, again, they're blaming the gun, that it's the gun's fault. The truth is, my friends, that if I took this pistol that's on my hip and put it here on the table and left it alone for 100 years and nobody touched it, that gun would not hurt a soul. It is never the gun's fault. It is the person that pulls the trigger.
That gun might also disappear if you just look the other way for a minute.
Yeah, it might. I'm not wearing my dress gun today. Men have guns like women have purses. We have a gun for every occasion. I have one. It's a beautiful, beautiful Browning high power. I don't wear it very often just because it's kind of a heavy gun and I'm kind of a little guy. But anyway, there's a nationwide call to recall the M18 handgun. And they're claiming that this thing it's able to fire all on its own. Well, the truth is Sig Sauer, and let me just show you a picture of this so you know what we're talking about. Okay, so that's the Sig Sauer M18. It's a military version, and they do produce a civilian one. It's called the P320. Great firearm. I mean, I really like Sig Sauer pistols. I don't own one, but I really like shooting them. I think they're great guns.
Yeah, I carry a very similar one. Mine happens to be a Smith. I also have a couple of Rugers, and they're all kind of after what Glock did with the striker fired.
Yeah, all striker fired.
And this is not new technology. This is stuff that has been out there for a long time. SIG certainly knows what they're doing. They have built thousands and thousands of
probably
weapons
millions
like this. Yeah.
All right. So this story is actually from Cheyenne. Now, the family of an airman who died on duty at F.E. Warren Air Force Base has called for a discontinuance of the M18 involved in his death through a legal representation. And this is also, if I'm not mistaken, this is also the same firearm that was used in the base shooting earlier this week. Airman Braden Levon, a 21-year-old defender assigned to the 90th Security Forces Squadron at F.E. Warren Air Force Base. It was his first duty assignment, and according to an article by the Muhlenberg County News Leader, Levon was from Greenville, Kentucky. He was involved. All right. Let's see here. The incident, here we go, involved a Sig Sauer M18, a military-grade version of the controversial Sig Sauer P320. It's not controversial. It's a great pistol. A popular civilian pistol that law enforcement agencies and gun enthusiasts carry nationwide. The family is now calling for military and law enforcement across the country to discontinue the use of the M18. We, as attorneys representing the victims, have been calling for years for SIG to recall this weapon, redesign it, and do so in a way that doesn't harm the risk and risk the safety of the people who rely on this gun the most. And let's see here. But their basic argument is that this gun can fire on its own. And that's what happened to this airman. The truth is, that gun fires when you pull the trigger. It doesn't. There's no magic finger that pulls that trigger.
There are some interesting things in this, and I looked this up when I first saw it because I wanted to try to understand it, and I found and it was a schematic, and it showed what they think possibly could be happen, and it depended on a tremendous amount of wear. I mean, we're talking about thousands and thousands of rounds fired in order to create the wear that could theoretically allow something like this to happen. I'm quite incredulous.
I don't really see how that's going. I mean, even if, like as you say, the trigger is really, really worn, even if that's the case, you still have to pull the trigger. I mean, it is not going to fire on its own.
There are redundant safeties in a lot of these weapons, and I just keep going back to it's very experienced technology. And I'm not impugning anybody. It's entirely possible the jury's still out there. There could actually be an issue there. It's not out of the question.
Well, okay,
But,
so all right, go ahead and finish.
I was just going to relate a little story. We had somebody that wrecked a semi-tractor trailer in Europe and swore that the problem was that the brakes didn't work because the air pressure had gone out.
Okay.
Okay, what that person didn't understand is air pressure on a truck keeps the brakes released.
Yes.
If you lose air pressure, the brakes engage.
Right.
They didn't understand that, so they were just making up a story trying to cover their own tail.
Exactly.
And I don't know how many times I have seen young soldiers, especially those who aren't particularly used to handling firearms, break some of the proverbial rules.
Rules, yeah.
And I find that much more likely as a case. Again, the jury's still out, but I remain very skeptical.
Okay, so any product that is produced, it doesn't matter if it's a firearm or whatever, any product, every once in a while you're going to have one that has a malfunction in it. It's just you're not going to produce something perfect every single time. There is going to be a malfunction. This lawsuit against Sig Sauer claimed that the P320 and its variants can fire without pulling the trigger. This has caused several cases of people, including law enforcement, being shot by their own gun. Quote, the airman's family are absolutely mortified to understand how big this problem is. Let's see here if there's anything else in here. All right, so the response to this lawsuit is from Sig Sauer. The statement added that the temporary bans on the M18's use were reactionary and that the P320 cannot, under any circumstances, discharge without the trigger first being pulled from the front to the rear of the trigger guard. Now, let's just assume that, as Ken says, this thing has had 10,000 rounds put through it, and it's worn out, and that trigger is worn. Still, I mean, if it is worn to the point that it can fire on its own, which, again, I don't see, I just don't see that happening. As soon as you put the shell in the chamber, it's going to go off. I mean, the trigger would have to be that light, at which point you would know that, I mean, it's not going to fire. But I mean, there again, if you're providing, like actual maintenance on your firearm and you're cleaning it and you're taking care of it, that's not going to happen. And, this is another one of those frivolous lawsuits. Guns don't shoot themselves. Guns don't kill people. People kill people. And, in the case of the other military base shooting, that guy intentionally did it, right? He's the guy that took the firearm in there and shot his coworkers. And so it's not the fault of the gun, nor is it ever. And if there's a malfunction with the gun, which, I mean, had I not lost all of my guns in a tragic boating accident, I mean, I could tell you that at one point I had a whole bunch of them. And, I mean, I've got some that are really old, and they've obviously been shot a lot and still don't have that problem. And so, I think this lawsuit is frivolous. The P320 is a great firearms, as well as the M18. There's no reason why you should even hesitate to purchase one of these. The trouble is that a lot of these lawsuits are filed by people, just like the guy with the brakes that you brought up, Ken, that they don't know a lot about firearms, and they're putting blame where the blame doesn't deserve to be, and it needs to be on the person carrying the firearm. And again, if you know anything about guns, which obviously the person that wrote this piece does not, you'll know that, that's not going to happen. Well, we've burned up another busy broadcast, 2 hours on Friday. Make sure that you don't miss the podcast tomorrow, weekend update. And we'll see you next week, my friends. Have a good weekend. From the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.